Let's start with that password problem. Three parts to the password problem. And the first part is there's just too darn many to remember. Most of you can probably remember, as I can, when I only had two passwords. I had one that was my secure password that I used for my bank and my brokerage account and those things. And it's something else I use for everything else. But I was probably only logging into 20 or so sites at the time. Life has gotten more complicated. A recent study found that most people have over 100 different passwords that they're using, and that we're logging in on average to over 200 different sites. So stretches most people's memory to remember 100 different passwords. So that's the first part of the problem we need to address. How do we remember them all? Second part of the problem is we don't make good choices when we select our passwords. Since we're trying to remember them in a lot of cases, we try to make them easy to remember. But if they're simple and easy to remember, they're also easy for bad actors to hack into. So that is the big part of the problem there. We have passwords that can be hacked. One thing you can do, instead of using a password, which most people use a single word, maybe embellished with a letter, with a number or a special character, is to use a passphrase. So for example, I love to travel and eat pizza 72 exclamation mark is a fairly secure password. I'll show you more secure passwords later, but it's a pretty good one just because it has lots of characters. It has uppercase, lowercase, it has numbers, it has special characters. So it has all four of the critical components, but it's going to be harder to hack than if it was just pizza 72 exclamation mark. Because the programs that are used to hack into your account, and it's typically done with computer programs. It's not somebody sitting at their terminal typing in passwords trying to hack into your account. And so they don't think about, they don't take context in the case. They're just looking at words. So this is probably not something they would latch onto and be able to pick up. So that's the second part of the password problem. We don't use secure passwords, so they can be hacked into. The third is using the same password for multiple accounts. So the problem there is, of course, if you reuse your password for multiple sites, then if someone does happen to hack into one of your passwords, they've got all your passwords. Because we'll talk about the two extremes. If you literally use the same password for every single site you log into, and I know there are people that do that, even if that is an extremely secure password, if someone does happen to hack it, they can now get into all of your accounts. On the flip side, if you use a different password for every single account you log into, if someone hacks one of your passwords, they've got just one of your passwords. They can't get into anything else. So that's the problem with using the same password for multiple sites. What the experts recommend, but it's fairly hard to do, is to use a different password for every single site you log into. That is possible using a password manager, but my recommendation is to at least start by having a unique password for any site that has money associated with it. Your bank account, your brokerage account, your PayPal account, anything that if someone hacks into it, they could get access to your money. You want to control that so that they only get into one of your sites. If you use the same password for your Kroger account and your Walgreens account, that's not as big of a problem as using the same password for your checking account and your Charles Schwab account. Any questions about the password problem, the three components of it, before I move on? Right, I'm going to define two words. I've already been using one of them some today, and people lots of time use them synonymously, but I'm going to differentiate between the two types because some of the things we'll be talking about address one or the other of these, and it is good to understand the difference. I've been using already the term hacking, and the best way to think about hacking is guessing. So hacking a password is somehow guessing the password, but as I said, it's not really somebody sitting at a computer guessing. It's a software program that tries different username password combinations. And just to show you how fast a computer can do that, over 2.2 trillion password username combinations can be tested in 22 seconds. So if you're using a fairly common password, they will easily hack into it. And what it is using primarily is proper names and all the words in the dictionary. So the extent that you're using something like that, it becomes even more likely that it will be hacked into. Breaching, on the other hand, is stealing your password. So instead of somebody using technology to guess your password, they're going into wherever your passwords are and stealing them. Now, this is typically if you have your passwords out there on the internet somewhere, they can hack into that site and steal your password. And that happens occasionally. You don't hear about it happening a lot, but it's typically fairly significant when it happens, because if they break into a site, we'll pick on Google, if they happen to break into Google's data center and they get to the file that has all the usernames and passwords that people use logging into Google, then they've, that's pretty significant, since that's tens of thousands, actually millions of people. Once they get your password through a breach, then the software is going to turn around and try that username password combination in all sorts of different sites, trying to get a hit, which goes back to the point about not using the same password multiple places. If they get a valid username and password, they're going to try it other places, primarily places that have money associated with them. So that's where that problem comes about. So that's hacking versus breaching. We'll talk a lot about both of these. So the challenge then is to come up with complex, secure passwords that can't easily be hacked, not use the same password for multiple accounts. That reduces hacking and breaching, and keeping up with all of our passwords, which goes back to that memory problem. We still have to keep up with them, even if we have especially if we have a unique password for every site. Unless you're a very unusual person, you'll never remember them. So now that we sort of understand the problem and our challenge, let's look at what we're doing today to see how it stacks up against that. And most of us started here, paper notebooks, way back when we had maybe 5 or 6 passwords. This was very good to use. If you're using the tools we just talked about, and you have a different password for most, if not all, your sites, it becomes pretty much unworkable. You really can't maintain it. There's really no way to sort it. So as you're adding new passwords, it's not in any particular order. You don't have it with you all the time, hopefully. So if you need to get your password when you're not at home where your notebook is, you don't have access. If you're carrying it around with you, that's even worse, because it could be stolen. So paper notebook is really not a good option.